everyone, I'm Cassidy Jensen, a licensed professional counselor.
And I'm Grace Allspaw, a licensed marriage and family therapist. And we are both owners of our own therapy practices and passionate about the world of therapy.
This is Two View Therapy, the podcast.
Episode 20, sorry.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode, 20. I think we were both just discussing really quick. Yes.
How crazy. 20 is kind of a milestone, I guess.
Yeah, we've really been cranking these things out.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
Well, as you can see by the title, which we haven't decided on yet, but you'll be able to see it, and we're going to talk about the Menendez brothers today.
Yes. Quite an interesting case. I watched all of the series of the monster.
Yeah.
What was it called? Monsters, featuring them.
Yeah, something like that. Monsters,
Lyle and Erik Menendez.
Oh, yeah, maybe it does say that.
Yeah, but you were dabbling in the Menendez brothers' actual documentary, I believe.
Yeah, and I've watched part of Monsters. I just have not.
Gosh, that light's kind of obnoxious.
I've not completed it.
Yeah,
so
I completed it.
I think I still have an episode or two left.
Fair warning, I suppose, if you're not familiar with this case, there is plenty of sexual abuse and trauma and physical violence. So if that is not your jam, we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah. Try and not be super graphic, but this is murder.
That will be difficult for me.
Yeah.
I'll have to tone it down.
I mean, we'll talk openly about it, but
well, you know I love all my gory details, but I don't think everybody else does, so I'll have to water it down. And I'm used to being able to give every nitty-gritty detail.
Okay, where to start with the Menendez brothers?
Yeah, I hadn't known really anything about it. And then, it's on the recommended or for you. I actually had another client, a teen, that was talking to me about it, and I was like, what are you watching?
That's how I found out about it. A teenager was like, she came in with a list. Oh, tell me of things. Mm-hmm. She's like, I've been watching a new show. Like, okay, what is it? Mm-hmm. I'm always down for a new show.
Yeah.
She's like, the Menendez brothers. And I'm like, what even is that? I didn't know about it. I had never heard about it before. Then I started watching.
Well, I had seen a couple of reels on Instagram with the actor versus the actual brother, as far as how spot on he was with his testimony portrayal.
Yeah,
he's spot on. At least Eric's character.
I've seen them of Lyle's as well, and then I just watched on the documentary some of Lyle's testimony, and I've seen part of the testimony in Monsters.
Pretty accurate.
Yeah, they did really well. I mean, you can only portray so much. You can't do every single detail, and you're not that person, and you're not experiencing those true emotions. Mm-hmm. But they did a pretty phenomenal job.
Yeah.
Comparing the two.
Well, Erik is the younger one. Lyle is older. I think by 2 years. So I think when this happens, Lyle's 21 and Erik's 19.
He's 18.
He's 18 now.
Yeah, I just heard that. So then when the trial started, they must be 2.5 years apart or something.
Okay.
They were 21 and 18 when it happened, but then when trial happened, they were 25 and 23. So they somehow line up that way.
Okay, so where was I going with that? The actor portrayal, he gets emotional and you're with the raw, real feelings, I feel.
Oh, yeah. I was watching it this morning. Just some light watching for the morning.
Easy breezy.
Yeah.
Start to the morning.
Chill. I was in the sauna.
Yeah.
Watching the Menendez brothers. I can imagine for both of them, and watching it, I read people's body language, and I assess facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, all the things in my office every day. So I have a decent skill in that.
Yeah.
Especially two people, because you can see how do they sit next to each other.
How do they interact and those subtle nuances.
Yes. Or like the little like wince of the face when someone says something or, you know, whatever. Watching their trial, I believe, I could be wrong. I'm open to that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emotion and it's very raw for them. I don't think that they'd had not a huge opportunity to explore or process any of that prior to sitting on the stand.
Well, so I want to kind of go back to their family is well off. They're involved in some burglaries. They kind of have a history of like pushing the envelope when it comes to some criminal behavior. A lot of things, at least in the monster series. I'm not even going to say docu-series. I don't know how accurate it is.
Yeah.
So they end up having to see a therapist. It seems like their parents have quite an involvement. What you gather from this show is the stronghold, the level of control their parents have, even though they are in their late teens, early adulthood. Years. Yeah.
I learned this morning because I was curious watching Monsters if the therapist perspective was true, that he's how like they truly found out, because that's my perspective of Monsters, was like he's how they officially got caught. Is that how you took it?
Yeah, because since he was the therapist was fearing for his life, so he called his side piece to let her know, like, I'm in here with them and I feel scared.
Yes.
And she ends up, I think, wanting a moment of fame, so she spills the beans with that.
Okay, so real life, he kidnapped her. The therapist. She stated he kidnapped her, locked her in his house, would not let her leave.
Okay, towards the end, she's on stand and the people think she's a kook.
Yes.
And like force fed her prescriptions.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So when I watched her clip this morning from the trial, and she said, like, therapist kidnapped me because he didn't want me to share that information, like, about the Menendez brothers, because all the details are kind of mixed up, but he asked her to listen in on a session with them, so she knew information.
Well, that's unethical, as we know.
Wildly.
Yeah.
Huge. Like, in our office, we have sound machines every, like, 5 feet.
Yeah.
Like, no one's listening in on sessions.
I don't want to. Occasionally, I will hear Chris sneeze through the wall.
That's awesome. I hear people, like, loudly talking, walking down the hallway. Like, in the middle of session, and I'm like, gosh, that's really distracting. Anyways, she actually ended up calling the cops on the therapist, was not actually trying to get the Menendez brothers in trouble, I don't believe. Like, he had dated her. She was a client, so that also...
that was unethical, too.
Huge.
Can't do that.
Yes. And then the Menendez brothers spoke about Jose.
Which is the father.
Searched around for the perfect therapist who would tell him what the kids were saying.
Oh, okay. So this therapist is wildly unethical.
Huge.
Yeah, okay.
Inappropriate in many ways.
Yes. Well, see, that goes back to the control. So Jose, the father, has this idea of what his family should look like, how they should be portrayed. I think he eventually...
Even with therapists.
Right. He eventually wants to, get involved in politics.
Yes.
And he wanted everybody to look a certain way. They needed to be really great at their sport. They needed to be in Ivy League schools. They needed to be perfect. The perfect family.
Yeah. Which, the pressure.
So we were briefly just having a discussion about how they're in their late teens, maybe just becoming adults when they end up murdering their parents. How did we get here? And I think That's where it gets a little convoluted.
Yeah.
Some are saying, obviously gradual buildup of trauma, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse throughout their whole life.
All of it.
But at least in Monsters, it was portrayed after their first trial, during their second trial of, well, they didn't ever tell anybody. The therapist never said anything. How do we believe that there was even any abuse? But you and I were just having a discussion of it seems unlikely to have that level of intensity and that feeling of stuck, even though they're adults.
Mm.
Like, that didn't just come out of nowhere.
Oh, this is ingrained.
Yeah.
That's my stance on it. This is ingrained in who they are as people. From a really young age, they were taught, shut up and sit down.
Yeah.
And
that's how it's going to be.
If you don't, I'll physically make you. Like, it wasn't just you're going to be grounded if you don't listen. Like, this was intense physical, emotional, sexual abuse. And I would say abuse in almost every way.
Every sense of it, yeah.
Yes, emotional neglect added on top of it.
Yeah, well, because it appears Kitty, their mother, had some idea of what was going on, but kind of turned a blind eye because we have to keep the family together and have this perfect image still.
Well, what would that do to her reputation?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I believe, at least it's portrayed, I don't know what she was into drugs, at least pills, and drinking a lot. It was kind of just checked out.
I haven't heard a lot about that, but I do think she was checked out. I don't know about drugs and alcohol. I haven't heard them talk about that yet, but I do think somehow she was checking out. I don't know if she was dissociating.
Yeah.
Just cognitively. I don't know if it was substances. I don't know. She was not present and emotionally available for her children, and they really needed her. And she didn't protect them.
Well, yeah, they mention in Monsters, I'm just going to keep going back to that. Yeah. That's what I watched. So if I mention it, it's that she was so invested in their father. That's why they killed her, because she wouldn't be able to live without him. She wasn't going to be able to be who they needed her to be. So she also had to go.
That was what I understood as well from the documentary. There was confusion why her as well. And basically the understanding was like, we can't do it without killing her.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't know life without Jose. And he's cared for her, even though probably not really. I don't know that there was a lot of emotional connection in that house.
It appeared it started that way, but
quickly shifted.
Yeah, we're just doing the things that we're told to do. And yeah, it seemed Jose had affairs and stepped out.
Yeah.
She was left to just fend for herself. And I think at times she was scared of her own kids.
Yeah, I think they were all scared.
Yeah, I think in different senses. Yeah, now that you point that out, fear was a common theme throughout the household for different reasons.
I do want to go back because I didn't think about this when you and I were talking earlier, but it just popped in my mind of people questioning, like, why didn't they just leave?
Yeah.
Cognitively, I think in some ways, or emotionally, I can't fully know because I'm not their therapist.
Yeah.
They were stunted. So you see them at the age of 18 and 21 when this happened, but you look at that as, okay, 18, you're an adult. You have two adult men, right? Why didn't they just leave? Well, they'd been abused from a really young age. So that could have stunted that emotional maturity and growth, which means emotionally they're 7 or 10.
Well, even as you're talking, and like, well, with the level of control that their parents had on things, like they didn't have the freedoms of navigating some of these things. So it's like in some ways they were living older than they were, as far as probably left alone a lot, or I don't know, some things, but like emotionally, like they didn't have those pieces. Their life was very much dictated. So,
well, the natural progression of independence, of teaching, like, okay, you're 12 now, you get to do your own laundry or whatever. You have to make one meal a week by yourself.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, it could be a peanut butter and jelly. It doesn't seem like those natural progression pieces for development happen for them because there was so much control.
Well, yeah, then they also were fortunate, unfortunate, however you want to see it. They had different members in their house as far as taking care of household duties. I don't know if it was quite a maid, but I think there was
housekeeper.
Housekeeper, gardener, and different other supports. So
their house is for sale. Sorry, that was random.
Oh, I wonder how much it's going for.
It's an expensive house, like in the millions.
Yeah, you piqued my interest there. I'd like to look at it. I wonder if it's been living in it since. This happened in the late 80s. Right. I want to say it was 87. They're 50s now.
They're 53 and 56. I just looked at that.
Okay.
So their ages are weird. Erik's probably about to have a birthday.
Okay.
To be 54. So it says the Menendez brothers' former home is located on Elm Drive in Beverly Hills, California. The Mediterranean-style estate is known for its many amenities, including a private tennis court, a pool, rose gardens, a wine cellar with a tasting room, a gourmet kitchen with high-end appliances, and walk-in pantry.
Why do you need a tasting room in your own wine cellar?
Crazy. A grand entry with a dramatic circular staircase, important Italian limestone flooring.
I don't know how that makes any difference, but okay. How much are we going for?
Well, let's see.
18.5 is my guess.
All right. Beverly Hills mansion where Menendez brothers murdered their parents sells for whopping $17 million.
I was a little close.
Okay, so it says it's been cold. It says where they murdered their parents in cold blood has been sold for a whopping $17 million, 28 years to the day after they were convicted of the heinous crime.
Okay. Yeah.
A wealthy Iranian family owns the house.
Interesting.
I think it went nobody lived in it for a while. Oh no, it says the house has been bought and sold several times since the brothers murdered their parents.
I was gonna say I'd be curious why nobody would, but it sounds like they did.
I probably wouldn't live there with two people being murdered like that.
I don't know. I'd consider it
for 17 mil.
Yes, like I can afford that.
That
kind of rose garden though. That was exciting.
I do think that gives perspective into how much they were worth. Obviously, in 1989, when all this was like all this stuff was happening, it probably wasn't worth 17 million because the market's different.
Sure, but I'm sure it was.
That's still $1 million home.
Well, yeah, I'm sure they were doing quite well. Well, I mean, because of their burglaries, their dad kicks them out of the will.
Okay, this is something that the defense.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Yeah, this would be the person that's defending either Lyle or.
Okay, what's the other called?
Prosecution.
The prosecution. Goodness gracious, that's where I'm at this morning. The prosecution. Part of their defense was these boys just wanted the life insurance policy. They just wanted the inheritance of the money. The life insurance policy was $650,000.
Oh,
which please don't get me wrong, that's a huge chunk of change.
Yeah, that's a good policy there.
But if they would have waited, if that's the defense, they just wanted this money.
Yeah.
They could have waited and inherited well beyond that, I believe.
Yeah.
Because they get the house, they get, depending on death, they get a life insurance policy, and then they get everything left.
Yeah.
So that's confusing to me. Like,
well, that again brings us back to like they wanted out so badly, and this was the dabble within the court case itself of if they wanted out so badly, why did they plan it so much and why the day they did, and the parents were unarmed and minding their business when it happened. So you tell me. But then I think a lot of the confusion and where it becomes dicey, I suppose, in Monsters is talking about the sexual abuse and where does that come from, and was it scripted or did they prepare? Because they go very heavily in descriptive detail what happened to them.
That's where I have a hard time thinking it was fake.
Yeah.
Because they knew too much. If they weren't being abused that way.
Mm-hmm. Who comes up with that? Yeah, we have like the cinnamon on things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I haven't heard them talk about that, but yeah. And like, I just watched this morning both Erik and Lyle in court, their testimony on the stand, and talking about, they even talk about Lyle abused Erik at one point.
Okay, so they discussed that themselves. Okay, because that is a theme, in Monsters as well. So,
which I think amplifies this is learned behavior,
right?
Like,
well, because it's Jose does it to Lyle, who is 7 or 8.
Yeah,
and then he does it to Erik.
Yep. And I think what I have gathered from both of them speaking, because in this documentary, they're also talking while they're in jail. Like, there's the overlay of that, of them just talking to someone. And I think both of them had in their mind that meant their father loved them. That alone time with him, where it was just the two of them, he wasn't screaming at them. And I think when that was going on, he was kind of nice during the acts. And so both of them thought, this is how you show affection. This is love. So then Lyle does it to Erik, not meaning to harm him or do any damage. But this is what Dad does to me to show me he loves me.
Yeah. But it sounded like that stopped pretty clearly. Yeah. And then Erik just suffers the abuse again, well into present time, when he ends up murdering his father. So, I mean, 10, 12 years.
A long time. And I at no point want to justify them killing their parents. There's no like, oh, that's acceptable, right? I want to be really clear about that. I can also see, I don't really understand it, but I see how they got to that point of, we have been abused, we are scared. I think they were probably living in constant fear of,
I can imagine that the nervous system dysregulation, like always having to be on or prepared for the next thing.
Yeah.
In the docu, I keep on calling it documentary, in Monsters, Erik, describes there's different versions of the sexual abuse, kind of dependent on the mood. So even with that, like, what's it going to be?
He speaks in the documentary of, somebody says to him, why didn't you tell your dad no?
And is that an option?
Yeah. He said, I told him no once. And they ask what happens. And he says he left the room and he came back with a knife and held it to my throat. And said, like, basically, I'm going to do what I want and you don't get to say anything. And if you do that again, I'll kill you.
Oh my.
So really intense. And he says to him one day, what happens to you if you tell anybody about this? And Erik says, you'll hit me. And he says, wrong. What happens to you if you tell anybody? And he says, you'll kill me. And he says, yes, I will. So there's that, like, amplified, if I do anything here, my life's at risk.
Well, and if what I gathered too, Jose had a lot of internal shame going on too.
I think he was probably gay.
with some of the acts that were portrayed, it seemed like maybe,
or at least bi.
Yeah. Well, they very much didn't like the idea if Erik was going to be anything other than straight. That seemed like it was a no-no.
I also think he battled that. I saw that in Monsters. I haven't seen much of that in the documentary, but how can you not question sexuality if you can't control body, right? Like, your body does whatever it does. There's no control of that. And if he was getting aroused with his father, that makes you question, am I gay? So no wonder there was that battle for him. Who knows if, because I felt that in Monsters, there was this kind of like subtle.
You mean with Erik?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Erik's gay, which, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know if it is officially said one way or the other. I don't know.
I haven't heard anything one way or the other.
Yeah. But it just seemed like there's something stemmed from Jose and his sexuality and how that was okay. Well, because in Monsters, it betrays him, you know, when he's off doing different things, getting like male escorts and performing acts. What, as the Romans do to, what did he keep saying? Like, to build strength?
Yeah.
Make you tough?
Yeah, I think that is what it was. Have you ever seen Euphoria?
No.
So that one's fake. It's not based on a true story at all. I don't think. In that, though, there's a father who actually likes men, but he's married with kids, and he goes and sleeps with men or transgender women. Yeah, that made sense.
Yeah.
Like, which way? And records it. And his young son, probably 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there, finds these recordings and then ends up growing up and kind of being attracted also to men, but not allowing that. Like, he watched this pornography and kind of learned behavior. Like, this is what you do. You step out of your relationship and you sleep with the same
that, but it's behind closed doors.
Behind closed doors. So you see that process, and I think they did a really good job of showing reality, even though that's a fake show, of that you learn behavior. Like, this is learned behavior of, you see your father. For the Menendez brothers, they saw and experienced their father abusing them, so same gender, and then they continue that even if it's not really how they feel. Does that make sense? Like, there's this created pattern through generations.
Well, and I think that's common in abuse.
It's common not in abuse. Like, I tell people all the time, this didn't start with you. Like, you have learned this. This has passed through generations.
Oh, absolutely.
When I do a genogram, I ask, anybody else in your family experience blank, whatever that might be, anxiety, depression, ADHD, whatever. Do you think anybody else in your family experienced this? 9.5 times out of 10, I'm going to have someone who says, oh yeah, my mom and my grandma, or my cousin and my aunt. Like, there's always.
Like, further on down the line,
Yes. Yeah, I did one recently where there was, like, almost everybody on one side of the family experienced the same thing. On the other side, nobody.
Interesting.
But you see the difference of, okay, there's nobody on this side and there is people on this side. How does that then affect you as a person? What do you carry with you? I think the Menendez brothers. You see some of that because we talked earlier about Lyle and Jose being more similar and Erik and Kitty being more similar. They took on different sides.
It appeared Erik was more introspective and sensitive and inquisitive, but just like, I don't know, had a lot more awareness, whereas Lyle was more quick to anger because I think he was trying to suppress his true feelings, whereas I think Erik it was more acceptable for him to feel it or show it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know in your documentary if they discussed it or not, but it appeared, and Erik felt in Monsters that he was the least favorite. They didn't like him. Nobody did.
He didn't say it that way, but in one of the times where he's talking, he does talk about he deeply wanted connection with his mom, and he got connection with his dad through sexual abuse. So he craved that so much.
Oh, I'm sure they both wanted some sense of security, and that just absolutely wasn't going to happen.
No, it was not going to happen. Which then, we're not judge, jury, executioner, right? We don't get to choose, like, in jail, not in jail. When you think about all of this of, they wanted love and connection, they never got it. Instead, they got abuse and neglect. Should they be in jail?
I think that goes to show, like, you can have everything, you can have millions, but if your upbringing isn't compassionate, safe, caring, kind, loving, what do you have?
I think even that as adults.
Yeah.
If you don't have the emotional safety, security, love, all of that, but you have millions of dollars in the bank and you're still unhappy.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of chat around money means you're happy. Like, you have everything if you have money.
Right. No, I think studies have shown, like, it's up until like a certain monetary value where like your basic necessities are covered. So you don't have like the financial stressors. Up until that, maybe it can bring happiness. So you don't have those worries, but past that, what is it providing you?
These people had money.
Money.
And still did not have what they needed. Which I know, and I need to understand more about this, but I know in Monsters it implied Jose was abused by his mom. Did you?
Yes, because he ends up having a phone call with her later to bring it up because his sister had said something, and when he confronts his mother on about it, he calls her one night after he'd been drinking. She basically says, "You're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about," and he gets very upset.
So from my point of view, that's generational. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's just TV. But also that makes me wonder if for Jose, it wasn't about, I mean, on the surface, about strength and teaching his sons, like, be a man, deal with pain, whatever. But was it also taught, this is how you show love and affection to your kids? Of if his mom was doing that to him, or abuse in general.
This is how we're connected.
Yes. So then he just has continued that through another generation.
Interesting, yeah.
Who knows if his mom was the first, or if she was also treated that way.
Makes you wonder. I'm curious them now and what type of mental health services have been offered, or, you know, what they've done over the last 28 years or whatever.
I've seen some stuff and heard in the documentary both of them say something along the lines of, like, there's not a day that goes by that we don't regret this, basically. I think it was Erik said right after he wished he hadn't done it. And it was interesting. You'd find this interesting. The night of the murders, his car was in the driveway. So within the search area, all of the gun shells, bullets, shells.
It was a
Shotgun shells. Oof, took me a second there. Shotgun shells were in his vehicle. They had gunshot residue all over them. They even said there was smoke in the room. So much smoke in the room. You'd only know there was smoke in the room, or only see smoke in the room, if you were there when the shots were fired.
Yeah, it was betrayed. Like, the detectives in the series were like piecing that apart. They were like, they said there was smoke. I see there's a window that has a hole in it. Where would
How?
Yeah.
Yes.
The smoke would have left.
Yes. So I think it's Lyle who says it, and he says, if any cop would have pressed me that night, I would have folded. Nobody asked. Nobody searched my vehicle. Nobody tested for gunshot residue. Nobody asked.
Yeah.
They just say, we were at a movie tonight, and they're like, okay. Like,
yeah.
That's
not what I'm used to. They would have been, at least interviewed in a different place.
Nope, none of that.
And my crime scene work, I've photographed different people at different times. So like, it depends on how well they weren't viewed as a suspect. So I don't know if I would have necessarily photographed them, but I feel like that car would have definitely been part of the search warrant.
Casings.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know. It just seems like why not? I guess I don't know.
Interesting, right?
Because in the show, I believe Lyle ends up sweet talking them, saying like he's got to get the tennis racket for his brother because he's got a lesson. So he goes in the trunk and quickly takes all the shells and then brings them inside in the duffel bag.
I don't know that happened in real life.
Okay.
Because he says, like, all of them were in my car and nobody looked. So he didn't indicate that he removed them. Maybe he did.
I wonder if he's so aware of that at that time and how he says he would have folded if he was pressed. Did he want people to know?
Actually,
yeah.
I am curious of thinking about from a mental health perspective. I don't know all the details, okay? I'm not diagnosing someone. I don't know all the details of.
Right.
But I would
only speculate.
I would speculate they both have some PTSD.
Yeah.
I mean, prior to the killing even.
I think it'd be complex PTSD.
Complex PTSD, which is in the DSM. Let's start a petition to get complex PTSD.
Complex PTSD is different than regular PTSD because it stems from multiple events throughout multiple phases of your life. Not one event.
I did a training this last weekend where we talked about complex PTSD and just trauma in general, both. And if there's court involved, then lawyers prefer no therapy prior to getting them on stand because then they still look like a victim. So if we're thinking about their mental health state after they've now killed their parents, also they probably don't trust therapists because
I wouldn't after that.
The little dude, yeah. So how in the heck? Like, I would never murder my parents. I could not.
No.
Fathom.
It's probably a healthy headspace.
I don't know that I could fathom harming them. Like, I don't understand it. I've also not been abused by them. So like,
yeah, does that just put you in a different headspace? Again, it's not excusing it, but we can't imagine what that might look like.
No. When my parents die, I'm going to really need therapy.
Yeah, I'm going to be unwell.
And they're not even, hopefully, going to be murdered. I don't think, like, likely both my parents are going to die of old age or a tragic accident, right? No one's probably going to murder them.
Yeah.
I would lose my mind. And for these two men who took their parents' lives to then potentially not be in active therapy, I don't think the justice system does a good job of that in general.
It's interesting. And then shortly after, they go on a spending spree and buying all of these expensive things, luxury watches and suits and cars, living in penthouses.
And Erik goes on a vacation out of the country, which Lyle's arrested while Erik's out of the country.
Yeah, I thought he was there for a tennis tournament.
I don't remember if they specified why. I thought maybe he was just on vacation, but maybe it was a tennis tournament. And he returned to turn himself in. She probably could have stayed there forever.
Yeah. At least what I watched, he thought that would look better, but he regrets, at least in the show, he had regretted coming back because it seemed like it made things worse.
Okay, this is random. Not to do what you just said, but something about what you just said reminded me of Lyle wearing the hairpiece.
Oh yeah, I think about that scene a lot because they just put a bald cap over his existing hair, so it looked a little funky.
I didn't think about that. But that was even used as manipulation and control.
Yeah, no, his dad told him that he had to do that. Again, balding, unacceptable. You need to look a certain way.
Which then, that's so interesting. In that scene where they're all worked up, they're sitting at the dining room table.
They're having a family dinner.
Jose's screaming at him, really upset that he's dating this girl. I think that's the scene.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, she came over there like, she's not appropriate for you. Again, control.
Which he's screaming. Then Kitty ends up ripping the hairpiece off. And Jose's like, oh, I'm sorry, son. Like, you see that really significant transition of, I'm screaming at you. What you're doing is unacceptable. Emotional disconnect completely.
Yeah.
And then this super quick shift of, I'm so sorry. Like, oh, this has brought shame that we've now all seen your bald head.
But it's interesting how they pick and choose things that seem a little bit more trivial, I suppose.
I would, you know what? Maybe you and you have the criminal justice background. I could go back to school. And we should do therapy and interview criminals.
No, I really did contemplate being like a forensic psychologist.
I have thought about behavioral science, like that piece of it, like understanding the mind of criminals. That's really amazing to me. And I would so love to understand from a mental health perspective what was going on there. Because if you're to the point, and I don't believe they did this for money, like that's my opinion. I don't think they did this for money. They were at a point where they were so scared. They'd been abused and neglected for so long. They killed their parents.
This brings me back to their burglaries. They were getting resources so they could have things on their own without needing their parents. I think it was a little, I don't know, a way of getting some sort of attention, though it was not great attention.
Oh yeah, it was. There was something else going on underneath the surface.
Yeah.
I do think the big lesson in all of this is something's got to change in parenting and abuse, and it's part of why there's mandated reporters. And you have to observe other people and pay attention. Are they okay? Is their living situation okay? Usually don't be like super nosy, but there are signs that you
can be an anonymous reporter as well,
or tell your therapist, they'll report for you,
as long as they're not a piece of shit like theirs.
Dr. Oziel.
Yes.
Yeah. Which
you need an ethical therapist.
Find a good one.
Yeah.
With all that, something's got to change.
Yeah,
we got to go back to if nothing changes, nothing changes.
We wanted to say thank you for listening today. You can find our Instagram at 2View Therapy and view our merchandise through our Etsy shop at 2View Therapy.
Please rate, review, and subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. If you are in a mental health crisis, contact your local crisis center, or you can call and text 988.